Louis and I took our time going home. I spent the time writing in my notebook, and I wanted to make sure I didn't forget anything. It was turning into more of a diary than an actual book. I guess I will have to rewrite when I get back to my time on Earth. I thought about going back to transit and visiting one of those rooms for a couple days. I had already imagined myself doing just that when Jack and I were there. Anyway, I needed some place alone and peaceful, without distractions, to write. Louis mentions the Garden Nebula. I asked, "What's the Garden Nebula?" I think it is probably better to show you rather than try to explain it. Do you want to go? It's a perfect place if you want some alone time. Alright, let's go. 10 minutes later we were facing the nebula. It looked like a garden with hundreds of different colors, all arranged in the shapes of spring flowers. Have I been here before? Yes. Many times. Last time we spent a week looking at all the different clusters. That's why I suggested it. It was a good idea. Thanks. We spent 3 days traveling in and out of the nebula. Well, Louis flew around while I sat on the couch writing. On the third day I told Louis I was ready to go. We came into the atmosphere of Commerce near its North Pole. I was intrigued by all the polar ice, and the gigantic glaciers. A few of them were calving, sending large waves across the open waters. I told Louis to set a heading across the Northern Ocean, which changed from frozen to tropical waters. I dropped close to the water and created a wake spraying at least 75 feet into the air. I couldn't help myself. Once across the ocean, I came upon an imposing expanse of desert. While crossing, I flew over several oases surrounded by the hot sand. I considered stopping at one when I spotted a large building up ahead. It turned out to be one of the many libraries throughout Sierra. Did I mention I love libraries? There were hundreds of libraries erected in various harsh climates throughout Sierra. This one sat in the heart of the scorching desert. The goal was to make them look ancient or abandoned. I went straight to the library instead of stopping at any of the small oases. This library was surrounded by pools, cactus, and palm trees. The building itself was in the form of Greek architecture. All the libraries were built in the Greek form and similar to one another. From the air, they looked like six-legged octopuses. Each one had a center dome 1/2 mile in circumference. From the dome, 6 legs, or halls extended out over a mile in 6 different directions, and each hall was 100 feet wide. Skylights ran down the middle of the ceiling, from one end of the hall to the other, ending at the center dome. The skylights added a pleasant natural light throughout the sections. The exterior walls were composed of gray granite blocks with 20 doorways cut into each wall, placed evenly along the length of each side. A porch circled the whole exterior of the complex and was constructed of Khorstan granite, 16 feet wide, with 15 steps leading to the ground. Exquisitely carved marble Corinthian columns lined the outer edge, set 15 feet apart. Those columns supported the upper roof over the porch. The top or roof of each hall was dressed with fountains, gardens, and small trees. Also, small sitting areas were distributed around, each one joined by narrow tile walkways. The roof of each hall was held up by massive cedar beams, from the planet cedar, with a stone platform set up top supporting the gardens, fountains, and small buildings. The interior ceiling displayed natural woodwork featuring those same cedar beams. 4 of the halls were libraries, and down the center of each stood 14-foot-high, dark walnut bookcases placed from one end to the other. Each hall had 6 rows of the bookcases, with 8-foot aisles in between each of them. 21-foot aisles were on either side between the outer bookcases and the exterior wall. Every 75 feet opened to a 25-foot space in which one could sit, converse, read, and study. The 4 libraries included a second story, with a walkway and banister running the full length of the right side of the hall. 12 sets of stairs, up against the outer wall, led up to the second floor. The second floor contained small rooms where people could find a secluded place to read, relax, or spend the night if desired. Often, visiting authors stayed in the rooms when they came to read their work to the public. The floors of each hall had a different species of wood flooring. The one I entered was laid with stained and polished wide mahogany planks, set in various patterns throughout the hall. I noticed the place smelled of old books and dry wood. The scent screamed of history. As an added touch, a small chamber was placed at the end of each hall where one could get something to drink, such as coffee, tea, soda, or whatever one desired. You can pick up a tasty smoothie there. I like the mango coconut smoothie myself. The other two halls contained museums. One was an art museum that contained modern-day paintings and sculptures, the traditional stuff one might encounter in an art museum. I searched for pieces of John's artwork in the art museum but found nothing. Many of the carvers displayed their works in those museums. Not one artist who lived before the millennium could match the painting or sculpting talents of the contemporary ones. I remembered in the past devoting hours looking at just a single masterpiece. The other hall was an adventurer museum. Because of Jesse's and my trip to the small tavern in Cupumsica, I was eager to look around the adventurer museum. I spent a couple hours picking out books to read and videos to watch at a later time. I suspected I had hundreds of books and videos of Jesse's quests, although I didn't remember at the moment where they were. I eventually made my way around the whole complex. Afterward, I stopped to get half a dozen tacos in one of the small restaurants in the dome. Kids, on a field trip, raced around making every kind of kid noise. Since I have come to Sierra, I don't think I have seen so many active kids in my life. I watched to see if anyone would seize control of them, but no one did. Apparently, they were at the library to hear a writer read one of her children's books, titled, A Day on the Floating Mountains. How curious, what a nice title, I thought. I stayed the night as I was fortunate to find an empty room. I picked out a Bible to read Genesis before I fell asleep. I knew it by heart, but I always get a warm feeling sitting, enjoying a cup of coffee while reading God's letter to mankind, and I'll never tire of it. I've always been that way, even before I came to Sierra. Thank you, Father, I prayed as I passed out. I slept in the next morning. After getting up, I entered the dome to have breakfast, eggs, bacon, hash browns, and a cool glass of orange juice, which took me back to the farm, and Alex. I wandered around and chatted with the curators. As I got ready to leave, I overheard an author. I assumed he was more of a reader than an author, because of the book he planned to read. It arrested my attention. Robinson Crusoe was one of my favorite books. Already, a group of people were sitting around waiting on him. Now, he had my curiosity. So, I stayed and listened to him read. When he read, something strange happened. The manner in which he read the book, it was like I was there. I lived every word, every emotion Crusoe expressed, being overwhelmed by the loneliness and the fear he experienced, all read in such an archaic language. Before I knew it, it was late afternoon before he finished the book. Afterward, others around me discussed the story. One had this point of view. Another had a different impression. I thought to myself, well, this isn't me. I was hungry again. So, I thanked him for the story and headed to the taco stand for more tacos to eat on the way home. What a splendid story, and how the reader brought you into it was incredible. I'll do it again soon. I called for and boarded Louis to go home. After arriving at home, I spent the rest of the afternoon on the beach with a paper and pen, writing. I still had more to write. I finished putting down my thoughts and went over everything I had written. I thought of Sophie. That made me feel sad, which made little sense. Even after spending 2 weeks with her, I already missed her and the rest of my kids. Something was different. I longed to see them. Jack showed up, and Dana prepared a terrific meal of tropical fruit. It was refreshing and exactly right. Afterward, we sat around the fireplace talking. Dana and Bart joined us, which was odd. I said, I figure I've been here in Sierra for at least 11 months now. It has been like one long vacation for me, seeing a world I could never imagine. Although what I have realized, and most significant, was I could have spent a lifetime in any one of those places I have seen or visited. It overwhelms me to think of doing so. Then, I named people I hadn't seen since coming here, like my brothers and sisters, or my pastor, brother and sister White. I thought I would see them. Also, I was concerned for my best friend Reyes, and asked, "Where is he?" "He's busy elsewhere." What an interesting comment. I pressed, and Jack told me my brother Gary lived on a 100-square-mile ranch in one of the other regions of space. He called the name of his ranch the Flying Blue Horse Bed and Breakfast. Jack said, "I thought it was an unusual name." I answered, "No, that's what I expected." I guess there were two ranches in the family. Brother White was active in Alaska and British Columbia, supervising a restoration project. Jack told me I visited him and Margaret often. I was happy about that. Then, he told me Reyes was leading a development project in California. I said, "He's probably rebuilding LA." He was still ambiguous, and I had no clue what he meant, and then he said, "Gary, Reyes, and others needed protection from your constant interrogation. Not everyone would resist, and you would figure out things you shouldn't. What did it matter? If I asked the wrong question, I would not understand a thing they told me, anyway." Jack laughed and told me again. "The future isn't set in stone. Sierra was only a possibility or probability, not an absolute." He told me not to mention the rest of my family and friends. I was not there for that purpose. For some, I only feared they did not survive as believers. Yet, I hoped that wasn't the case, and I relied on that hope, hoping most of them remained true to Christ. Besides, I took comfort in Jack's comment. I knew there was still an opportunity for any who sat on the fence. I said, "I have loved everything I've done while here, particularly all the traveling." "It only makes sense, Jeff. You are a watcher, and watchers travel, which is part of our responsibility." He paused and then lectured me. "Just remember, you've been given pertinent memories covering the last 200 years of life in Sierra. As you already figured out, the purpose of those memories was to establish a foundation for the story you must tell. Don't forget. Imagine, if you came here for only a limited period, and left quickly afterward, you would only remember it as a dream in the night and soon after forget the seriousness of telling others. For that reason, God provided you a lifetime of experiences with the memories for the foundation of your story. The message is, the old world will become this world, and anyone who desires can live here, but there's a cost. It really isn't a cost at all, but it's one's trust or faith in Christ. He's the answer and the reason this exists. He died so we could live in heaven. Sierra isn't just a place. It's true peace of mind. Here, everyone lives with no uncertainties or fears, unlike the world you are going back to with its constant turmoil. People on Earth are living in fear for a good reason. The worst time in human history is right around the corner, and they need hope. Even if you only persuade one person with hope, it will be worthwhile. You will see. You must include all of your experiences in the story. That's why you are here." Okay, I understand. Although I thought I should have had an enlightened moment, an epiphany to help me do so, to inspire me. "Jeff, I'm sure your moment will come, and I assume the moment will be obvious when it does." The conversation was taking a turn, reminding me of an exit interview for leaving a job, or finishing up an audit. Funny thing, as I was writing today, it felt as if I was finishing a story. And now, I was getting a sense of something extraordinary happening, as if we were saying goodbye. I had to ask how much longer I would be around. No one had a clue. Dana asked if I gave up on Christ, would she exist in this future? Her question put a lot of responsibility on my shoulders, not to mention how profound a question for a companion. No one knew the answer to that question either. I said, "Dana, my good friend, I was not the only reason Sierra exists. I'm sure someone would imagine an equally important idea. The angels created the companions, not people. So, I suspect they might build them regardless if I came here or not. Where did that come from?" I told her I had no intention of giving up, and there was no need to worry. She laughed. "Honestly, I'm only circuits and energy. If I didn't exist, it would be irrelevant to anyone." "Dana, it's relevant to me. It most assuredly is." I turned to Jack, feeling a compulsion to say goodbye, but instead, I asked this question: who wrote the notebook? Jack reached down to his side, picked up and handed me the notebook. I assumed it was lost. Jeff, open it. I opened it to discover that the pages which changed to the foreign language now contained the diary I have been keeping since coming here. It felt like I just discovered Alibaba's golden treasure. I was the author of the notebook. Now, I knew my time, my life in Sierra, was concluding. The minute I looked up from the notebook, I felt a profound sense of fatigue. I passed out in my chair. The room and everyone in it disappeared, their voices withered into silence. I opened my eyes and discovered myself sitting in a wheelchair, in a hall with drab white walls dressed with yellow stains. The place stank of yeast. I couldn't move any part of my body except my head. My arms laid helplessly on the armrest. I glanced down at my legs, which appeared to be merely skin and bone, and I saw I was drooling on them. I struggled to move, but I couldn't even adjust them in the wheelchair. Others surrounded me, everyone in the same situation as me. An elderly woman was across from me, struggling to set a record on an antique record player. She couldn't get it to play. 2 orderlies came into the room. When I saw them, I understood I was in an old folks' home. However, both orderlies looked out of place. They were young, with a certain radiance around them. I testify it looked as if one of them had wings underneath his shirt. They fidgeted with the player for several minutes, trying to get it to play. One of them looked in the back to find the power cord had come loose. He used a screwdriver to tighten up the connection. Afterward, the other placed the record on the turntable and started the player. At first, the record sounded annoying and scratchy, like an old poor-quality AM radio. I observed as the old woman tapped her finger on the armrest of her wheelchair. She did nothing other than tap her finger, but I could not turn away. I noticed her feet began moving, one then the other. She raised her head and arched it back and picked up her arms over her head like a swan preparing to take flight. Her moves resembled a ballet dancer. All the while, the music became softer and distinct. Others around me didn't even notice. I wondered why they hadn't reacted to what I was seeing. The walls of the hall turned dark brown and deteriorated into blackness. Except for the old woman, every soul around me faded into the blackness. A brightness surrounded her body and above her head as she moved her hands. As she swung them, streams of light followed blue, green, white, and golden traces. She rose up and was no longer an old woman. She was beautifully middle-aged. Her feet glided across the floor. A golden light accompanied her, reaching from her, drawing her body. With each step, she became younger until she became a child. The blackness turned into a blue sky laced with white clouds. She now flowed more like a bird in flight. The music became melodic, enchanting. It turned into a brilliant symphony of sound and movement. The woman danced with such elegance as if she was the music, and I watched as I remained confined to my wheelchair. I don't know how long she danced as I was so captivated. I lost track of time, uncertain if there was time. While I watched, the music faded, but she continued to move. She turned and looked right at me with the countenance of an angel. In the revealing silence, she said, "I call this dance, born again." It could not have been clearer. Immediately after the woman told me that, I found the strength to stand. As I did, I found myself on the beach standing before the beast. This time, I was the young man. The creature picked me up and flung me down onto the beach. I recalled the dancer and the other young man. I stood up and yelled at the beast, "I will live. You will not defeat me." I ran at him and he at me. I hit him so hard we both sailed through the air. Next thing, I came to rest lying in a field of tall grass. I looked up to see several people hovering over me. Not feeling any pain, I sat up like nothing was wrong, except for a pair of scraped knees. The people standing around me struggled to make me lay back down, but I refused and wasn't having any of it. I looked up the hill towards my car. There it sat, crushed and pushed upon the sidewalk. An ambulance arrived and carted me off to the nearest hospital. As the doctor checked me out, he kept rattling his head. "What's wrong, doc?" He paused, looked at me, and explained, "Well, it doesn't appear there's anything wrong with you other than 2 skinned knees. I would have expected someone who was in an accident like you, should be going to the morgue rather than the hospital." You appear to be otherwise unscathed, but I want to keep you overnight in case we missed anything. Okay, if you think it's best. I sat back in the bed as they wheeled me down to a room which had another patient in it. That patient's curtains were closed, and they were quiet. My kids came into the room, all asking questions. When the interrogation was over, I told them of my adventure and everything that happened during the moment before landing in the field. I must have talked for 2 hours. They all stared at each other and maintained, he must have bumped his head pretty hard. I think one of them asked the doctor if they might want to keep me more than just overnight. I said, the entire time I spent there should have ended with an earth-moving revelation, but it didn't. It will no doubt take me some time to figure it out. I recalled the dancer. All of them said how grateful they were it wasn't anything worse, and I should consider both directions before driving through an intersection. Now, it was getting late, so everyone went home. The room fell quiet, yet my mind was restless as the old woman's music played in my head. After a short while, right before I fell asleep, a voice called out. Hey, it came. I hesitated before responding as I was tired and already half asleep. If I responded, I would have a hard time going to sleep afterward. Perhaps if I ignored him, he might think I fell asleep and will keep quiet. He continued, and the tone of his voice tugged at my heart. I couldn't stay quiet. So, I answered, hey, how are you? Not so good. I'm dying of cancer and only have a few days, perhaps hours left. I'm sorry to hear that. So am I. I overheard your story. It sounded so real. Was it? Yes. It was real to me. Then I considered more urgent things. It was more about a person than a place. He moaned. I kind of gathered that. Please tell me more. You sounded so full of hope. I have no hope at all. Why? My wife and children died almost 20 years ago in a car accident. They were Christians like you. They attended church every Sunday and prayed all the time. I didn't believe much of what my wife said. Our life was happy as long as she didn't force her opinions on me. I'm sorry for not believing her now and full of regret. There was a pause. I said, I know that kind of loss is a tough thing to live with. It made little sense if God was so good. Why did he take my family from me? I'm so sorry, and I understand your pain. My son died tragically within a month of his 15th birthday. He said, I got mad and gave up on life. I have been living on the streets since. He coughed for a couple of minutes and continued, I couldn't bear the loss. How did you survive? It was difficult, and I got mad at God too for several years. I understood how he felt. My heart reached out to the man. I got up to pull back his curtain, which separated us, to get a look at him, face to face. He was younger than I yet. His illness caused him to appear much older than he was. I could tell he was dying. I took a chair. He said, there was something in your story that affected me deep inside. He paused again to cough. Before you finished, I realized I needed hope. Your story made me think of hope. It was as if you spoke directly to me. The story is about Christ, as much as it's about heaven. You said your wife was a Christian. Did you ever consider at any time during your marriage about your own salvation? No, but I would like to right now. I know my time is short, and I don't know what tomorrow holds, or what it might take from me. He stared into my eyes, and asked desperately, tell me, how do I live? How do I find the hope you shared in your story? I immediately visualized the young man on the beach, defeating that beast. This man lived a tough and sorrowful life. He'd been beaten down for years, for decades. Thankfully, after everything he'd been through, in the end, he wanted to live. I knew he would defeat the beast in his life and live. We talked about how each of us has sinned against God, how we needed to repent of those sins. I told him he needed to call upon Jesus to be his Lord and Savior. We prayed as he turned his life over to Christ. There was a particular brightness and a certain light that came on in his eyes afterward. We continued to talk for a while. I answered whatever questions I could, ones he needed to hear. Finally, He looked at me and said, "I am exhausted." So, I said good night and returned to my bed to lie down. I eventually fell asleep, only to be woken by the sound of alarms coming from his bedside. While attending to him, the doctors and nurses were discussing why I was in the room. It was the wrong room. I was supposed to be in the room next door. While they were deliberating their error, the man next to me succumbed to his illness. I heard them pronounce him 6 minutes after 3 a.m. I was happy we talked about salvation, but I forgot one significant thing, to ask his name. It never came up. It didn't seem important. How could I be so careless? So, I asked the nurse who was closest to me, what was his name? "Could you please tell me?" "Mr. Stevens." She answered. She picked up his chart and said, "His name was Jack Stevens." She must have caught my expression, because she followed up by asking me, "Did you know him?" That was the moment. The end. Perhaps, the beginning.